Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Kash Ali has had his boxing license suspended by the British Boxing Board of Control for his actions in his fight with David Price, where that ended in a disqualification after Ali bit David Price. That was in the 5th round of their fight. It emerged later he had bitten David Price multiple times. 2 were picked up during the broadcast, one in the 3rd round and one in that 5th round when the fight was ending, but there were other bites apparently. So Ali suspended pending a hearing, and you have to say likely further sanctions to come. His purse of £20,000, it has been withheld, and potentially he could face a hefty fine and a ban whenever that hearing does actually occur. And I have to say this interim move of suspending his license, the right move. There is no place in heavyweight boxing, let alone boxing in general, for a guy to be biting his opponent. That really was disgraceful and not something that should be tolerated. And when it happened earlier in the fight, the referee, he didn't really sort of react in any sort of way, but obviously it was a different circumstance to the end of the fight when Ali was in all sorts of trouble and really delivered something quite vicious. You can see on screen here the teeth marks and such. It really was an action that he shouldn't have been, he should never have done this. And I fully support him being suspended, because there is no place in boxing for that sort of behavior. There's been a number of people calling for a life ban for this sort of behavior. I do think at least a lengthy ban would be justified. A life ban, maybe that is going a bit too far. Ali himself said originally in the aftermath of the fight that there was no excuses for it. He spoke to IFL TV, said that, you know, the build up to the fight, the first time that he'd been on the big stage, he was pumped up, he wanted to fight, and he sort of alleged that the street mentality had kicked in and it was stupid. And he said, as mad as it sounds, when I ended up on top of him, boxing went out the window. I just thought, this is a fight now. It was out of order, and I apologized to him. And Kash Ali's trainer, Adam Etches, he is very unhappy with what went on. He said, as a trainer and as his friend, I'm leaving him to stew until he knows what he's done. When you're doing something like that, you've got to hold your hands up and say, you know what, I was out of order. If he doesn't do that, I can't have that. I don't want tarring with that brush. Anyone who knows Kash, even David, if you sit down with him and talk to him about it, he'll tell you Kash Ali is probably one of the best kids you could meet. But when you look at what he's done, how can you say that? Kash is genuinely a nice kid. That's completely out of character what he's done. We can't change what's happened. All we can do is apologize for what we've done, and hopefully the board are a bit lenient towards him, as it was his first test and his first chance. I think he was too charged up before the fight. He was just reckless what he did. I know for a fact it wasn't because he wanted to get out of the fight, even though some people are looking at it that way. I know for a fact that isn't. And that was Adam Etches talking to Sky Sports there, with his thoughts on the actions of his fighter, Kash Ali. And those comments there about Kash Ali not wanting sort of to get, you know, a way out of the fight. It's very hard not to look at it like that, because in that round, he actually had his best moments of the fight, had Price in trouble. Price was starting to gas, and I think some of that has sort of glossed over the performance in general in the fight, because one, it wasn't a great fight, and David Price didn't look that great. But the circumstances and the controversy have sort of overshadowed his performance to some degree. But he did land a couple of punches to really sort of put Ali in trouble in that 5th round when he was sort of up against it. So you have to credit him for that fighting spirit there. But Ali, at that point, it looked like he was ready to go. And that's why people are saying he was looking for a way out. But maybe if he had his bearings about him when he was rocked by that, you know, those punches that Price caught him with, I believe there was a body shot, then there was a right hand or a left hook, I can't exactly remember. But maybe he should have taken a knee. Maybe he should have tried to circle away, and instead of, because what he did was try to tie up, and ultimately David Price let himself be pushed back and ultimately tackled to the ground, and that's when Ali delivered that vicious bite that the referee sort of caught it in the midst of that bite. And this is sort of a shot here from ringside showing Ali with his head burrowed onto Price's chest. If Ali had have handled things a bit differently, maybe he could have actually survived the round. Maybe he could have survived that onslaught because it looked like David Price was wilting. So maybe we can sort of say that there was some inexperience here. Maybe some nerves played a part. But, you know, whatever the excuse is, it doesn't really matter. He did it. He bit David Price multiple times, and I do believe a ban is fully justified here. There is no place for that conduct in the sport of boxing. But even in a street fight, that's not something that happens all the time either. So, yeah, a bite, you know, in a professional boxing match, that certainly is not something that happens that often. And the instances of it have been actually, over the years, well documented. Probably the most famous of them, Mike Tyson biting off a piece of Evander Holyfield's ear. And in that case, it looked like Tyson potentially wanted a way out too, and that's the way people saw it. So maybe Adam Etches has a point here. Maybe Ali wasn't looking for a way out, but maybe he didn't handle the situation in the way that he should have. But that's kind of besides the point. It happened. But David Price, he sort of elaborated on the situation. So he told TalkSport, when he was on the floor on top of me, I went a bit limp and I thought, he doesn't want to get up here. I thought he'd at least try to get up. The next thing I felt was his teeth sink in, and I didn't know what to do really. It happened quickly. It was just a bit of a mad experience. When I stood up and first went over to him, part of me wanted to just lay him out there and then. And actually, when he went over to him after the fight, it was actually quite amicable. So that whole sort of, you know, I was, I think with a lot of people when we saw David Price go over to his corner, sort of shake his hand and, you know, that sort of stuff, it looked very, very civil, more civil than I think many of us would have been towards Ali had we been in the same situation. So Price says, I thought better of it because it would have just got myself in a load of trouble and it would have caused a lot more trouble on the night. And he's right there. I think that is the right way that he handled it, and given some of the crowd reaction and the way that Ali was ushered out of the arena where he was pelted with drink and other sort of plastic bottles, all sorts of stuff was tossed at him, the reaction he got from the crowd. If Price had have reacted in a more negative way, and if he hadn't have been so cool, calm and collected, maybe things would have kicked off and ended a bit differently. And he is right. He probably would have got into some trouble had he have sucker punched Ali and laid him out or something like that. So David Price really did show a cool head there in that situation. So Price says, I don't know whether it's out of character for him or not, because I've sparred with him quite a bit and I've always found him to be pretty respectful. I just don't know whether the build-up and the press conference has got to him, riled him up, whether he's just realised that beating me isn't as easy as everyone seems to think. He thought, I'll take the exit route and give him a little bite. David Price talking to TalkSport. So this whole situation, it certainly has been rather bizarre, and yeah, keen to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think that the British Boxing Board of Control should ban him? And what sort of ban should that look like? Is that something where it's 6 months, a year, 2 years, or a life ban? Some people have been calling for a life ban, like Tony Bellew, for example. But often he can be prone to going to the extreme end of town on these things, unless his friends were involved, and then he sort of gives them a pass, sort of says they're a nice lad, or that sort of stuff. So there have been some calling for a very severe ban. Some people don't want to see Ali back in the ring again, want him banned for life. Others think there should be some more leniency here. I think I'm somewhere in the middle, where I think he actually should get a pretty severe ban. I think a year or two would be appropriate, and a fine of some sort. But I think there needs to be a message sent that that sort of stuff is not okay. Even, you know, despite the excuses, if it wasn't deliberate, it still happened. And, you know, he can't take it back, and then there is a price to be paid. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out. If you want even more boxing content, come and join me on Patreon. Every week on a Sunday, I drop a new video on something topical or thought-provoking from the heavyweight division, ranging from rankings, the business of boxing, the false economy of deluded fanboys, the twists and turns in the division, to assessments of fighters and their statements. I hope to see you there, and for more information go to patreon.com/boxing squared. The address is on screen now.